Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 2 October 2017. Coming to you with a From the Sharpening Bench video tonight on a knife that, gosh, I guess has been around for 2.5 years maybe? I don't know. I think this model came out in 2015, probably early in the year. If you guys own one and know for sure, please be sure to let us know in the comments. The knife that we have for you tonight is the Benchmade 490 Amicus, or for you Latin scholars out there, Amicus. A-M-I-C-U-S, the Latin word for friend. What is this thing? Well, it is what I would call a gentleman's folder with a blade 86 thousandths in thickness, 3 7/16 inches long. I'm calling this a high saber ground spear point blade with a swedge, and Benchmade's sort of normal finish, a light tumble stonewash over satin. The handle is T6061 aircraft grade aluminum, hard anodized in black, and kind of a satin finish on the hard anode. Does not have that sort of chalky granular stonewash of a 940 series knife. I think you can see the difference in sheen from the Amicus to the 943. So it's a little bit of a slippery knife, and this belongs to my sharpening customer Zach, and he is rocking this knife sans pocket clip. You know, a knife that just slips nicely into the bottom of the pocket. So it, attached to that 3 7/16 inch blade is a 3 9/16 handle with a lanyard hole, and it meets in the middle. No standoffs, no backspacer, much like an auto knife would. It is extremely svelte, 478 thousandths thick is the handle, and it weighs in at a rather stunning 2.7 ounces. It's also an axis lock knife. It's a flipper, and it is a spring assisted. It's an axis assist knife. So I know what you're thinking. Yeah, Rob, you brought out an assisted opening flipper so you could hate it, so you could just bag on it for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. Well, au contraire, mon frere. You would be right if you've been watching the channel and you think that I have a negative opinion of flipper knives and spring assisted knives, because I do. Generally, I don't like flippers. I much prefer thumb studs or spidey holes as a deployment mechanism. However, in conjunction with its spring assist and its super low profile flipper, I think this knife has a purpose, and it's a valid purpose. You know, generally, I think when you see a combination of a washer pivot suspension, a flipper, and a spring assist mechanism, it's generally going to occur in an inexpensive knife with bad manufacturing tolerances, and the only way to get it to deploy reliably and easily with a flipper mechanism is to put a spring behind it, and that way you don't really have to worry about how precise your pivot is. You got a spring to kick that knife out. This is not one of those cases. This combination on the Amicus, I think, is really, really well thought out. If you notice, the flipper barely protrudes from the spine of the handle. And it's sort of that same wraparound flipper. I think if we look in here as it almost comes to open, you can see daylight between the flipper tab and the frame, and as it rotates forward, you should be able to see a big old channel where the axis bar rides in the tang of that blade. Much like the ball axis flipper, the 300. but with the spring-assisted detent, it flips much more nicely than the 300 does. So here's kind of what I see here. I see a gentleman's folder, maybe for somebody even older than I am, who doesn't have great dexterity and appreciates the ability to get a knife out quickly and with no effort. I mean, this flipper tab is so small, but it doesn't need to be big. All I need to do is just gently place my finger along the spine of the handle and then sweep backwards with no effort at all. Just lay my finger down and sweep backwards with very little pressure, very little effort. I mean, it needs nothing. And bang, it's out. So, you know, if I were someone who had bad dexterity, if I had bad arthritis in my hands, just very little hand strength, and I'm a knife nut, and I see all these guys on YouTube flicking these knives out, and I think, man, I'd like to be able to do that, but I just don't have the dexterity. Well, you don't need it for the Amicus, and it's a very dialed in mechanism. Nice free pivot, no blade play. Really nice centering on this particular model. And let's look at some of the details. How about the grind on this blade? Very high, very thin behind the edge, very consistent in its thickness. This knife sharpened at 16 degrees per side. It's thin enough I probably could have gone 15, but it's S90V, so not a super tough steel. So I wanted to give it a little bit of stability. Its thinness does sort of scream for a thin angle on the edge, but you know, S90V can be a little chippy. So I thought 16 was the prudent angle. Also, this choil has not been enhanced by me. And look, the edge nice and consistent in width all the way to the heel. No issues with a choil that doesn't clear a plunge grind. It's just beautifully executed. Benchmade is getting better at that on some of their newer models. Let's see, the Proxy, the 928 Proxy was nicely done in that regard. The Anthem is nicely done in that regard. They're listening, they're paying attention. How is it in hand? Well, it's just wonderful. Saber grip is beautiful. Now, as I said, the knife is a little slick. I would prefer to use it with the pocket clip just for an anchor point in some grips, but it's smooth, but it's very ergonomic. You're never going to go forward on the knife. You know, nice big self-guard in the handle, and look how that flipper is just seamlessly integrated into the handle when the knife is open. I love that clean look. No protrusion of any garish nature by that flipper in either the closed or the open position, and still a great self-guard in the handle. So the saber grip is super secure. Index finger in that first scallop, 2 fingers in the straight portion, and the pinky hangs out in that very nice pinky groove at the back. Very secure for a slippery knife. In the reverse grip, it's probably never a knife you're going to employ in a fighting fashion such as this. It's not super comfortable. The thumb's kind of looking for a place to be with that sort of point up at the spine area of the handle. So I wouldn't rate it high in that grip. The hammer grip is beautifully secure, and so is the draw cut grip. Just a very nice knife. How about the overhand pinch grip? I think it was sort of made for this grip. This is going to be a gent's folder. It's going to open mail. It's going to cut through some packing tape, maybe break down some cardboard, and do so in an admirable fashion. How about a little food prep, cutting up an apple with that 86 thousandths thick blade? Perfect for those kinds of chores. S90V should be stainless enough for those tasks. Wouldn't have been my choice of steel for this knife. You know, I'd prefer maybe S35VN, M390, even maybe 20CV. Benchmade seems to have been running a lot of that lately. Maybe a carbon fiber version with a 20CV blade would be kind of cool. You know, there's a couple things Benchmade does well, and you know, we won't talk about all the things they don't do so well, like fit and finish on handles of certain materials and blade centering on certain knives and all that stuff. But two things they do very well is design a blade that's made to cut, and this one certainly is a great example of that. And aluminum handles. Benchmade does aluminum handles like nobody's business, and this is one of their best, I think. Super handsome knife. You know, it's not a knife that is particularly striking. You don't look at that and go, oh my, what is that? But it's just a knife that you look at and you go, wow, that is a nice knife. And it is. It's just a nice knife. You know, maybe in another 10, 15, 20 years when my fingers aren't working so well, maybe I should have one of these squirreled away. I think it's just a great application for technology I don't usually love. A spring-assisted flipper and a gent's knife. Just something that doesn't take any effort at all to get out. And you know, it doesn't make a big thwack. You know, you could probably flip that out with the flipper and the spring and not even arouse attention when doing so. It does have a lock, by the way. I think I hadn't mentioned that yet. This device right here, it will lock it closed or open, I would imagine. Yes, it does. Many of us wouldn't use that, but it is there. Just a little beauty. Let's look at some size comparisons. First of all, let's do the Benchmade 943, just because I have another one of Zach's knives handy. And I think you'll see that the 943, if I put the front of the handles together, is going to be a little longer in handle and a little longer in blade. And then here is a Paramilitary 2. Same story. A little longer in blade, a little longer in handle. But still a pretty efficient package, I think. Is the Amicus. You know, I don't come across or go through my hands too doggone many spring-assisted flippers that I think I'd like to have that knife. This is a knife that after I spent an hour or so with it on the sharpening bench, I thought I'd like to have that knife. I would have this knife were it not S90V. Just not a steel that I really care to own. And maybe we'll see another model. Another variation of this with a steel that I like a little better, but I know some of you guys love S90V. If you're not doing any cutting with this knife that, you know, has any impact or any sideways force on the cutting edge, it's gonna hold a chip-free edge for a long time. And of course, you know, if you don't mind spending $25-30, you can just send it to me to have sharpened like Zach did. When it needs it, you shouldn't have to do it very often because it's not a fun steel to sharpen at all. It doesn't like to get sharp, and it really fights you in the upper grits to develop any kind of, to remove any scratches from lower grits. It's just very difficult to work with. But, you know, it does reward you for your patience and effort. Eventually, I think this one got pretty sharp. Let's take a look. I think it did. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I think it push cuts phone book paper. Yes, it does. That ain't too shabby for S90V. handsome little package, huh? And there it is closed. Look at that nice line. No blade sticking up over the handle. The handle's actually a little over the blade. You know, it kind of nestles down in there like an auto knife would. That'd be a great variation of this knife, wouldn't it? An auto amicus, you betcha. You listening, Benchmade? That's all for this one, my friends. Thought you'd like to see this. I kind of like looking at knives when they're a couple years on the market. And, you know, I think I'm going to sort of refrain from, you know, racing out there to review knives that just came out. I think I'm going to let them season a little bit before I weigh in. Not only in the market, but with me. You know, I've seen a few of these knives, and they've all been rather impressive. Not bad advice to the collector either, you know. Don't race to be the first one of your group to get a new knife on Instagram and, you know, risk losing 30 or 40% when you try to flip it. Let them marinate a little bit, you know. See how guys like them. See if they're going to be knives that are significant over time. I think this one just might be. It's pretty cool. That's all for this one, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and Zach's 490 Benchmade Amicus are sharp.